There's a peculiar tendency in human behavior to overlook what is essential simply because it is not immediately dramatic. And vitamin E falls squarely into that category. It doesn't announce itself loudly like caffeine with its instant stimulation, or sugar with its rapid gratification. Instead, it operates quietly, almost invisibly, at the cellular level, protecting, stabilizing, preserving. And that's precisely why it's so often neglected. Vitamin E is, at its core, a powerful antioxidant. Now, that word gets thrown around quite casually, but its implications are profound. Your body is constantly under assault from oxidative stress, an inevitable byproduct of living, breathing, and interacting with the environment. Left unchecked, that stress contributes to aging, weakens the immune system, and gradually erodes your internal stability. Vitamin E steps into that chaos as a kind of molecular guardian, neutralizing damage before it spirals into something more serious. But here's the problem: modern diets, despite being abundant in calories, are often deeply deficient in essential nutrients. You can eat a great deal of food and still be, in a meaningful sense, undernourished. And when vitamin E is lacking, the consequences don't appear overnight. They accumulate subtly: duller skin, reduced resilience, a body that doesn't quite perform the way it should. It's not catastrophic at first. It's just suboptimal. And that's a dangerous place to live, because it's easy to accept mediocrity when the decline is gradual. This is where nuts and seeds become remarkably significant. They are, in many ways, nature's concentrated solution to a modern problem. Small, accessible, and densely packed with nutrients, they provide one of the most efficient ways to restore what's missing. And there's something philosophically compelling about that. Because it suggests that the answer isn't necessarily more complexity, but better choices. You don't need a radical overhaul. You need awareness. You need intention. And you need to recognize that what you repeatedly do, even in the smallest ways, shapes your long-term health far more than any occasional grand effort ever could. Because in the end, it's not the dramatic decisions that define your well-being, it's the quiet ones you make every single day. Now, once you understand that vitamin E is not optional but foundational, the next logical question emerges. Where, precisely, do you find it in a form that is both practical and sustainable? And this is where things become surprisingly straightforward, because the answer isn't hidden in some obscure, inaccessible superfood. It's embedded in things you've likely seen 100 times and perhaps underestimated: nuts and seeds. Consider almonds, for example. They're not just a casual snack, they are one of the most concentrated sources of vitamin E available. A small handful carries a disproportionately large nutritional impact. The same can be said for sunflower seeds, unassuming, often overlooked, yet remarkably dense in exactly the kind of antioxidant support your body is quietly demanding. Hazelnuts, peanuts, and pine nuts follow closely behind, each contributing their own variation of this essential nutrient profile. But it doesn't stop there. Brazil nuts, pistachios, and walnuts add another layer. Not just vitamin E, but a broader spectrum of healthy fats and micronutrients that work in tandem. And then you have flax seeds and pumpkin seeds, which are particularly interesting because they bridge the gap between nutrition and function. They don't merely provide nutrients, they support systems: your heart, your brain, your metabolism. Now, what's important here is not that you memorize a list of 10 items and treat it like a checklist. That would be missing the point. The real insight is recognizing that these foods are accessible, flexible, and adaptable. They can be integrated into your life without friction. A handful of almonds. In the morning, a sprinkle of seeds over a meal, a small bowl of mixed nuts in the evening. These are not burdensome changes. They are subtle adjustments with disproportionate returns. And there's a deeper principle at play. When something is both simple and effective, people tend to dismiss it, precisely because it lacks complexity. But complexity is not the same as value. In fact, it often obscures it. What you're looking at here is a set of tools that are small in form but significant in consequence. So the question isn't whether these foods are powerful enough to make a difference. It's whether you're willing to take something simple seriously enough to let it transform you. Because sometimes, the most profound changes in your life begin with choices so small they're easy to ignore, but too important to dismiss. And so you arrive at the point where knowledge confronts reality. Because knowing what is good for you is one thing, but structuring your life so that you actually act on that knowledge is something else entirely. That's the gap most people fall into. Not ignorance, but inconsistency. And this is precisely where these simple foods, nuts and seeds, become more than nutrition. They become a strategy. It's not enough to say, "I'll eat healthier." That's vague, and vagueness is the enemy of action. What works is specificity. A handful of almonds with your morning routine. A small portion of sunflower or pumpkin seeds during the day instead of reaching for something processed. Perhaps a mix of nuts in the evening, replacing mindless snacking with something intentional. These are not dramatic interventions, but they are repeatable. And repetition, over time, is what transforms behavior into identity. Because that's really what you're doing. You're not just changing what you eat, you're reshaping how you see yourself. You become someone who pays attention. Someone who chooses nourishment over convenience, even in small moments. And those small moments accumulate. They compound in ways that are almost invisible at first, but undeniable over time. There's also a discipline embedded in this process. Portion control, for instance, matters. These foods are dense, which is precisely what makes them valuable, but it also requires restraint. And that's not a limitation, it's an opportunity to practice balance. To engage consciously with what you consume, rather than being driven by impulse. In a world that constantly pushes excess, learning moderation is a form of quiet strength. And then there's the practical side, making it easy. If healthy options are not immediately available, you will default to what is. So you prepare. You place these foods within reach. You remove friction. Because the easier you make the right choice, the more likely you are to repeat it. What you begin to see, if you take this seriously, is that health is not built on grand, unsustainable efforts. It's constructed from small, deliberate actions, repeated daily, until they become part of who you are. And that leads to a simple but confronting realization: your future health is not something that happens to you, it is something you build, choice by choice, day by day.